Our next session and presentation is a panel discussion on AI for good. Obviously, and you're well aware, the proponents of AI are all saying that AI will improve access to financial services, improve access to payments, and level the field, I would say, and decrease inequalities. On the other hand, you have those who say that AI carries with it inherent biases and inherent disparities and will only contribute at increasing these inequalities and this access to fairness. And so to help us get a better view of what it takes to have real AI for good, we have a great panel with great panel participants. Panel is facilitated by Rachel Williamson. Rachel is a journalist, has been a journalist for over 2 decades, and host of Breaking Banks Asia, the podcast. So let me welcome Rachel and the panel participants on stage. Thank you very much.
Welcome everyone to this panel questioning whether AI can be a force for good or bad. Now we've heard a lot of panels talk today about jobs, and this week talk about jobs, the loss of them, where the new ones could be. But there's also the possibility of built-in biases, data poisoning, and who truly knows what's going on under the hood of the large language models. But it could make finance fairer. So today we have on our panel Professor Sang-Hoon Cha from Seoul National University, Dr. Alon Halevy, Director at Reality Labs Research at Meta, and we have Beerud, Sheth, the Founder and Chief Executive Officer of Gupshup Technologies. I'm going to start by playing devil's advocate with you. The fintech and tech sectors are well known for their biases. Women are badly underrepresented in fintech, and AI has been shown to show bias against some communities of colour. How do we trust that these biases latent in the fintech sector are not going to be replicated in the AIs that come out of it? Who would like to start? Alon?
I'm not sure, but I think it's easier to fix bias in AI than fix bias in humans. Because in humans, they're rooted very deeply. They're not always aware of them. They don't know when they exercise them. In AI, you provide more data that has more diversity, and the model will do what it finds in the data.
Sang?
Well, I come from university, so I have to say, the education will fix. So, people will change, and the organization will change, and the data will get diversified. Yeah.
Beerud?
Yeah, I think, when you look at AI and you look at computing and algorithmic techniques, there are ways of quantifying, measuring, and therefore eliminating bias in a more systematic way, like, Alon said, compared to in humans, where it's embedded, it's invisible, it's latent, and you can't even tell. So in other words, if I paraphrase what he's saying, is AI is a force for good. We just don't know if humans are a force for good as well, right?
Thank you. Well, let's talk about how AI can be used for good and how it can be used negatively. Beerud, your company has a number of case studies where conversational AI is being used to enhance user experience with fintech. Can you tell us about some of these?
Yeah, I think, we are seeing a great adoption in conversational AI and conversational engagement. If people are not familiar, it means that, for a consumer, it's the ability to chat with a business, a bank, a fintech through conversational messages, maybe through a messaging app like WhatsApp or Instagram or things like that. And for a business, it's the ability to do marketing, commerce, and transactions through these chat messages. And we are seeing, a great adoption because in mobile-first countries, everybody's using messaging apps. And through these chat messages, they can accomplish, it's very quick and easy. You don't have to download new apps. You don't even have to learn new technology, you just simply ask a question, and it's as if there is a relationship manager or somebody, a human, helping you on the other side. Now, it might be a chatbot, an AI-powered software that can understand these queries and respond to it. So we are seeing huge usage by banks, insurance companies, brokerages, and so on, where anything you can do at a bank branch or in a call center or on a website or a mobile app, it is entirely possible through WhatsApp, right? We are seeing great adoption of these use cases. So whether it's discovering products, applying for a loan, getting your KYC done, getting funded, making your payments, bill payments, collections, and so on, could be
credit checks I saw as well, and KYC, all sorts of things.
Exactly, right? So you can do a lot of these services, and it's driving a lot of convenience, a lot of ease of use, and these tools, they're increasing. They're fairly secure. There's end-to-end encryption. There is security built in about, for example, with KYC information being shared, personally identifiable information. So there's a lot of these guardrails being set up for safety and so on. But simply because it's so convenient and so easy, I'll just use maybe one or two quick examples. We have a fintech company in India. They do lending for two-wheelers, and they had an app, a website, and an offline process, which was very slow. But they rolled out something on WhatsApp, where within 2 minutes they could approve a loan, and 20 minutes they could fund the loan. And their business, 95% of the usage shifted to these conversation surfaces, and the business grew about 40x. So we are seeing a great adoption in these sort of conversational AI capabilities in interacting in business to consumer interactions.
But it's not all good. Dr. Alon, you've seen some negative use cases. Can you tell us about these and how they can be turned around, if it's possible?
So I'm pretty used to being the representative of evil on panels. So I'm assuming you're talking about things like bad content on social networks. So on Facebook or Instagram or your favorite social network, whatever it might be, the fact that people can communicate and they can post things easily and they can share and things can be virally popular. The vast majority of the content that you see on social networks is positive content. It helps people connect with each other and find opportunities, find friends, find whatever you want to find. But there are also people who use these tools in order to spread misinformation, to express hate speech, bullying, calls for terror, calls for violence. And actually, Facebook at some point tracked 56 different violations. This is 56 different categories of what bad things people do. Okay. Now, so the first step of what, and this is not just Facebook or Meta, it's also YouTube and what used to be Twitter. We have what's called community policies. We say things that what you're allowed to post on social media. So you're not allowed to post naked, photos. You're not allowed to support terrorist organizations like the Hamas. You're not allowed to call for violence, stuff like that. So coming up with these policies is, not a simple task in itself. The problem is enforcing these things is even harder because you have billions of posts every day. You have them in over 100 languages, and here AI is not a nice to have; it's a must have. So what we've done over the past many years, or not many, 6, 7 years, is we've developed AI defenses that look at every post that comes in, or looks at every account that gets created, and tries to determine whether it's violating one of our policies. And if the AI system is very confident that there's a violation, it will immediately remove it. If it's not completely confident, it will send it to an army of human reviewers that hopefully understand the context, understand the language, understand whatever they need to understand, and follow a bunch of procedures in order to decide whether to let the content live or not. There are a bunch of other techniques that we use in order to reduce the harm from malicious content. Now, I want to point out that not everybody who posts bad or policy-violating content on social media is doing it on purpose. Sometimes you tell them, you're not supposed to say this, or you're not supposed to, use certain phrases, and then they're like, oh, sorry, I didn't know that. Anyway, so here, as you were saying, it's not AI for bad. It's people are using tools for bad purposes, and AI is actually is the main defense mechanism that we have today to protect us.
Sang, you're somewhat concerned about the rigidity of large language models and the transparency and the difficulty in retraining them. But you're also pretty optimistic. Can you tell us a bit about why you're optimistic about the situation?
Yeah. Thank you for asking this great question. There was a lot of concern here in this conference about the risks of applying Gen AI to financial sectors. But I'm very optimistic. I'm a technologist. I was formerly a startup founder, and I'm sitting on one of the venture capital in Silicon Valley. So I believe in the power of innovation. So there are a lot of problems that were addressed in this context, but there are a lot of brilliant people who can solve the problem with a lot of money being thrown into Gen AI at the moment in Silicon Valley and also around the world. So that's why I'm so optimistic, and based on my experience. But of course, there is a difficulties at the moment. Gen AI is a black box. We all know, But let's say the Meta's Llama 2 has 70 billion parameters, and it takes 1.7 million GPU hours. So that means, if you have 2,000 GPUs, then it takes 35 days to train a model. Of course, engineers are trying to shorten the time, but even if you're not happy with the Meta's current model, it takes time to train that. So with this kind of rigidity, you cannot expect the transparency and any other virtues of Gen AI at this moment. We can only control the input to the Gen AI, and we can probably track the output of Gen AI along the different LLM models. And then we need
Does that create a danger or some kind of risk, though, in that we can't see inside the black box?
No,
so we don't know if the data is... there could be an element of data poisoning. There could be things that we don't want in there.
So
it makes that we don't...
So I think what I'm trying to say is the only point that we can control is the data. So we need a kind of a tool, maybe new tool for managing entire life cycle of input and output of Gen AI. Maybe you can add more data.
Yeah, we got to get used to the fact that the power of Gen AI comes from the fact that we don't actually understand what's going on, right? These models are huge. They reason in ways that we don't know. For many decades, not many, we have few decades, AI tried a different approach where it was called the symbolic logic-based approach, that where we exactly knew what was going on. There were a bunch of rules. We could write the rules. We could change the rules. But those systems were only applicable to very narrow applications. Now we have these things that can talk to you about anything. So we now hopefully, my hope is that we're going to have another wave of innovation, another breakthrough someday, where we're going to get the best of both schools of AI, where we will be able to reason and understand what's going on. And but if you look at people, right? Humans, you don't always understand what humans are how they're reasoning or what's really going on in their mind, right? We use language in order to try to understand, but at the end of the day, it's language, and there's always some uncertainty about what was really going on.
Thank you, Alon. I'd like to ask you about jobs. This is a topic that has come up in the AI panels over and over in the last 2 days. Now, I'm a journalist, and I know that there's a lot of fear that AI is going to remove even more jobs from my industry, but, in fintech, AI is already removing jobs. I have two questions for you guys to answer on this. How do we ensure that AI do the right jobs? And what are the right jobs? Beerud, would you like to start?
Sure. So we work, as you can imagine, we work with a lot of banking and financial service businesses, but even beyond retail, commerce, travel, hospitality, healthcare, education, government agencies, and so on. And many of these, the examples I was giving where, the user experience in conversational AI, at least the user experience is such that a user can ask a query and it's as if there is a customer support agent, a relationship manager, an insurance sales agent on the other side, or a assisted commerce person on the other side giving you the queries. But in these cases, it's software that's doing it, right? So certainly tasks that are often, repetitive, that can be automated, and not even just repetitive, but even articulating responses and so on, right? So areas like customer support, relationship management, and so on, there will be some automation, right? But the way I see it is, in many cases, what we are seeing is, businesses, they use AI, conversational AI to, as they free up human agents from the simple and repetitive queries, those agents can then handle more advanced and more complex queries that drives even more sales and upsell, cross-sell, and so on, right? See, ultimately, AI is a tool that dramatically enhances the productivity of the team. And usually, when we talk to these businesses, it's never 100% versus 0%, all or nothing replacement. Think of it as a dial where AI, it can learn or solve maybe 20%, 40%, 60% of the queries, and that dial is gradually turning up as it does more and more. But the other thing, so it's not just a substitution, but the other thing is these businesses can now support many more customers. They can support much larger scale of business, right? And most businesses would rather expand their scope of, drive more growth than simply replace every human in the business kind of thing. So I think, the right framing of this is, when you ask, like even the question that is asked, when you assume that it's a fixed size of the pie and some of it gets automated and, AI takes jobs away from humans, that's one way to think about it. But the other way to think about it is what if the pie itself could grow 10x or 100x, right? What if you could have a lot more abundance? What if you could provide a lot more capabilities and services to consumers? And yes, there are things that humans can do. There are things that AI will do better. And to your point of how do we know it's doing the right jobs? Well, with AI, you can measure customer satisfaction, for example. And you try it with 100 users, and if it works well, only then do you put it out to 1 million users, right? So it's very quantifiable. It's easy to measure and detect and so on. But ultimately, I think, anytime in human history, new innovations drive productivity growth, which, expand the economic opportunity, create new jobs, and so on. So yes, it will automate some existing jobs as we know it, but on the other hand, it's going to dramatically expand the scope and create other jobs as well.
I'm going to pick on you.
Go first.
Okay. I agree with Beerud, right? I mean, AI is going to be your assistant. It's going to do part of your job. But let's look at the profession of journalism, okay? Since you brought it up. You're a journalist, and you're trying to get something out fast so you can get eyeballs, right? You write an article. Wouldn't it be nice if AI, first of all, did a factuality check? Some of what you're saying here is not supported by any of the facts in the real world. Okay, that's one. Number two is your article is extremely biased in this way or that way. Maybe it was your intention. Maybe it was maybe not. Maybe you're just moving fast and you need to do this. So my hope is that AI can actually contribute to the fact that when we do communicate, especially from journalists who have such an impact on the world, we can be closer to a common truth rather than a random cacophony of stuff that we as readers need to figure out. And we're lazier than you guys are, right? Because you actually write the article. We look only at the headlines, right? So now as a reader, I would like to be able to see that here are a bunch of articles about the same topic, and here are the disagreements, here are the biases, or if I'm looking at a topic that I'm actually interested in, maybe I want to find an article that is biased this way or that way, or it'll give me a counter argument, so I can navigate the information in a much more productive way. So
I would use that.
Okay.
It's my turn. I guess the Gen AI's power is a scalable automation of repeatable knowledge work, right? I mean, I can summarize that way. Then, we talked about customer-facing front-end, services, and then now we talked about the journalism. I mean, this Gen AI is good at generating text and whatever, in visual things. So, let's think about applying this to the enterprise, inside the enterprise, across the enterprise. I worked for a company called SAP for a while. So, you deal with the workflow. And there are a lot of work that can be automated. Their routine, for example, creating quarterly reports of companies to report to the government. The frame is almost same. You don't have to, repeat that much work. If the Gen AI generates a draft report based on the, quarterly, the financial whatever, then, this will, speed up. And there are a lot of work like this within the organizations, then people can be liberated from this kind of routine work. They can more focus on other things to improve the productivity or the profitability of the company. So I'm very optimistic about creating new jobs.
So I'll just add to that, actually, and the theme here is that we're blaming humans for all the bad in the world. The problem when you automate parts of the job is that we are, as humans, we get lazy and we don't actually check whether the results that we're getting from the machine are correct. And so the risk is we will rely on the machines too much. We won't double check them, and then bad things will happen.
Last question for all of you, and it is about that transparency piece that Sang you touched on. How do you build transparency into an AI to make sure that it is used for good, to make sure that it is not, used by bad actors for their ends? And how do you ensure that if their decision is made, it comes out at the end? Beerud.
I think there is, there are, so firstly, right, I think in terms of conversational use cases such as, we have a line of sight to having an AI doctor, an AI tutor, an AI therapist, and so on, an AI banker and an AI assistant. And there's many, many good use cases. But to your question of how could somebody abuse this? Well, if a bank relationship manager is asking for personal information, the chatbot can easily do identity theft, right? You can have a therapist bot, for example, could get personal, sensitive health information that can then be abused in many ways as well, right? But see, at least some of these examples are not in and of itself about AI. It's the technology and then who's using it and how they're using it, right? So they're two different things. One is explainability of the models and the software themselves, which there's a lot of academic work going on. But the other is, even if you can't understand the internals, you can certainly look at the output. You can certainly look at the behavior, and you can put guardrails around it. You can fix it, and so on, right? So whether it is end-to-end encryption so that the communications are encrypted, or whether it's rigorous testing, right, or having assigning certain companies or individuals responsible for the agents and what they do. I mean, it's no different from a website that can steal your credit card information and abuse it, right? It is no different from a mobile app that can also take these. And ultimately, who do we hold responsible? It's not the app or the website or the tool. You hold the people who created that responsible for these things, right? So I think for things like this, there's existing mechanisms, existing services that would cover it. Some of the fear and perhaps the theme of this discussion is there some greater existential risk when it becomes autonomous, when it becomes super intelligent, when it starts doing things on its own in an uncontrolled fashion. And frankly, just talking about it itself is forcing a lot of researchers and developers to figure out ways to prevent that from happening. There's something called constitutional AI saying, look, we embed rules into the AI saying you don't kill anybody or you don't hurt humans and things like that. So there's many different ways to address it, but I think just to end on the note that Sanjay was saying earlier, saying as we uncover the positive opportunities, we'll also uncover some limitations, which then will work on it, and the next generation of solutions will fix those and will uncover even more, right? But none of that is to say, we should stop doing what we are. Let's keep harnessing the positive power while building guardrails around the negative stuff.
So there's one thing that I learned in my 4 years at Meta is if you think AI is hard, try doing ethics, okay? Ethics is a really, really hard problem, and the point is that a lot of the questions we're asking today in AI actually translate into ethical problems. So when you say, what does it mean, when you ask, what does it mean for AI to do good, you need to define what is good, right? So presumably good has something to do with...
You need to define values.
Huh?
You need to define values.
Exactly. And you have to define what are the human values that we hold dear. And now, so the first thing is like defining what those values are. Now, which values are important to me might be very different than what are important to you, and maybe we live in a country where you don't get to decide that many, you don't get that many knobs over your values, right? So how do you? So the first step is you need to articulate what these values are, what they actually mean when you embed them in a system. So I'll give you an example, right? So when we say at Facebook that you can't post hate speech, right? What are we doing? We are saying that we prefer the value of protecting our audience over the value of free speech. And somewhere, right, you have to draw, right? We still give a lot of people a lot of free speech, but we also want to protect people. So somewhere we put the line, and we put it, not arbitrary, but we put a line somewhere. So the point is, you need to understand when you build an AI system, what are the values that you're baking into it, and what knobs you give your users to play with.
Thank you. Sang, you've got 2 minutes.
Yeah, so, thanks for all the good words. I only add that, want to add that, these values and the laws are different across the jurisdictions. So, then we need to think about how we automate, these checks, using the Gen AI technology. Maybe, we cannot cover the entire violations or whatever, but maybe we can cover some portion, automatically. That will probably handle some problems, but at the end, we need to have a human in the loop. Humans decide, you cannot leave, your responsibility to the machine. So that's my conclusion.
Thank you very much. I do love talking to optimists. Thank you, everyone, for joining us.
Thanks for having us.